I'm going to show you my very personal healthcare records and show you just how to exactly find your diagnosis. It's actually super easy to do, not a big deal. Now, for every single claim, no matter what type of claim you are going to submit, you are going to have a current diagnosis. That is just one of the big three criteria. So for this video, we're really going to focus on the current diagnosis. Now, I'll be using my VA medical records to show you this because all you have to do is go download your blue button report. But let's hop into this, okay? So this is half of my VA medical records. What I'm going to do is show you a SCT code and an ICD code, and we'll talk about those, okay? So the first one, let's go ahead and look up the SCT. So all I'm going to do is hit Control F, and then I'm going to search SCT, and there we go. So you can see that I have, this is your VA problem list, and we see SCT codes here, and each have their own identifier. Now, an SCT code, it's explained right here. It's essentially a treatment code, okay? It's the VA saying we are managing your care for this condition. Is it a formal diagnosis? Technically, the answer is no, but for VA rating purposes, the answer is yes. Now, what I want to show you here, right? So for this one, and don't go digging around, okay? I blacked out what I could, but for chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, this one, looking at status active means whatever date, right? So these are all dates that I blacked out, but whatever date this is, that's whenever they were managing PTSD for active. So for VA rating purposes, yes, this counts as the current diagnosis. That's one of the big three criteria there. Okay, so all you got to do is look up SCT code, which is a treatment code. So you can see here for chronic PTSD, anxiety, we'll go ahead and just, dig into me a little bit. Why not? There's headaches there. There's left knee pain. And so let's say I wasn't rated for any of this. Now I know that I at least have a diagnosis for PTSD, anxiety. These are the same. So let's claim mental health. We can submit a claim for headaches, for left knee pain, lower back pain, and wrist pain, mood disorder. That's also mental health. Alcohol abuse, we won't really get there. Polycystic kidney, sure. And all of those, okay? Now, there's another column here. It will have all of them kind of listed. Boom, there we go. And so it's a very short, quick and easy way to find your treatment codes through your VA problem list. Now, don't get hung up on the fact that I said an SCT code is not a formal diagnosis. Don't sweat it for VA rating purposes. All you need to know is you meet one of the big criteria, which is a current diagnosis, okay? You still need the in-service event. And so now looking at my SCT codes for mental health, for headaches, for left knee, now that prompts me to go look at evidence in my service treatment records for any complaints or so medical evidence or evidence other than medical for those conditions. Now, for a formal diagnosis, I'm going to show you some more of my records here. And so now, instead of searching for SCT, I'll be searching for ICD. And whenever I show that, you can see there's a diagnosis. So an ICD is a formal diagnosis, okay? There's some for acne, more acne, more acne. Okay, that's pretty embarrassing. Here we go, lower back pain. This is, and they have the SCT code there as well. So treatment, the ICD code is the International Classification for Diseases. That is an actual diagnosis. If you were to Google ICD TAC10 CMM54.50, it would come up as that, okay? And so that's what a formal diagnosis looks like. But remember, for VA rating purposes, the SCT codes are good to go. I cannot stress the importance of having the current diagnosis, documented medical evidence, and not relying on the C&P examiner, which brings me to my next point, okay? If you really have zero starting point as to what you're going to claim, look at your records. What does your evidence tell you? I always get the question, should I claim this secondary or this direct? And that's not the question you should be asking. The question is incorrect, actually. What does your evidence tell you? You either have evidence for direct service connection or you don't. You either have evidence for secondary service connection or you don't. You can't just magically say, but it's secondary, okay? You need medical evidence indicating where that condition stems from. And if you don't, you're going to be denied. Now let's hop back on the big three, because the current diagnosis is only one of the big three, and the in-service event is a critical component of the big three, right? It's like a stool with 3 legs. If you don't have one leg and you try to sit on the stool, it's going to fall over. The stool won't even stand up on its own. You have to have all 3. So the in-service event is evidence from service. Ideally, you want that to be medical evidence. Now we know that's, largely in the veteran community, medical evidence from service just does not exist. So the in-service event can also be evidence other than medical. Deployments, events that happened, right? A diagnosis that manifested itself or a documented symptom. Any of those would be hardcore or not hardcore. Any of those would be decent evidence, right? Now, a diagnosis from service would be like the golden ticket. That would be the standard, but you're looking for evidence from service. That's the in-service event. The second one's the current diagnosis. I use my VA medical records to show you how to find your current diagnosis. If you're using private records, ask your caretaker, right? Ask your primary care, or gather the records and search them yourself. You can also look at ICD codes in your private records. They will pop up. Now, treatment codes, ICD codes are solid. Another thing on the treatment codes is your treatment codes. Each of those have a little blurb further down. I didn't want to show you all that evidence because it's a little personal to me. But those will be documented symptoms. The reason that matters is because, yes, the CMP examiner is looking at service connection, but they're also looking at how to rate that condition. Well, the VA is looking at it. The CMP examiner is given their symptom severity. But if you have documented evidence, if that CMP examiner rates you low, then you could do a higher level review with your evidence. Hello, because we get evidence, you can rely on your evidence and combat that examiner. The problem is, if you don't have that evidence, whatever the examiner says becomes the gospel for your claim at that point, and you're at the whim of that examiner. So you either got evidence or you don't, okay? The SCT codes are critical for your claim. And yes, if you wanted to, you could pull those codes and submit those with your VA claim. If you want, that's totally fine. Okay, I would actually recommend it. And the third thing is the Nexus. And yes, the CMP examiner is going to give the Nexus. And I'm telling you right now, if you do not have a diagnosis, your claim's denied. And if you do not have the in-service event, your claim will be denied. Which means you absolutely have to, prior to submitting that claim, use your intent to file date. You have a whole year. Use your intent to file to gather your evidence from service, whether that's medical or other evidence, and then gather your current diagnosis and your documented symptoms and submit that as a claim, right? Fully developed claims are the standard. You want to get as close to that line as possible. Gathering the evidence for the in-service event and the current diagnosis is getting to that line as close as possible. Now, technically, yes, you could do a private Nexus and a private DBQ. I would not recommend that on initial claims. Personally, can you do it? Sure. It will definitely help your claim. But think about it. If you have evidence from service and you have the current diagnosis, logically, an examiner should be able to connect those. And if they don't, you have the evidence for the appeal process, right? Now, a private Nexus and a private DBQ does come in clutch for secondary claims and for appeals, and that's really when I would start considering that. I would not recommend a private Nexus or a private DBQ for an initial claim, but yes, you can do it if that's what you want. I just don't recommend it personally. Now, whenever you do start considering the private Nexus and the private DBQ route, okay, I always recommend these two things to be true. One, you're denied. Get it. I don't like the private Nexus and DBQs and initial claims. And two, you have the evidence. Why? Why does everything go back to evidence? because the evidence makes the nexus, not the person. Okay? The evidence makes the nexus, not the person. Meaning, if you ain't got the evidence, you ain't got the nexus. And ask yourself, are some companies writing baloney nexus letters because you're paying them $2,000-$3,000? You bet your bottom dollar they are. Okay? So listen, take the time, understand your evidence from service, understand your current diagnosis, understand your treatment codes, your documented symptoms, and use that walking into the CMP examiner to speak on your evidence. Everything that comes out of your mouth supports your evidence.